John 1, 4 through 5 says, "In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it." Well, if you're joining us in reading through this 30-day reading plan, today's reading is John 1, 1 through 9, and I encourage you to read that passage. Well, John begins his gospel with some very short history about creation, understanding, and God's reaching out to man. In these 9 verses, we see it is Christ who is co-equal with God. We see Christ as the light of men, and we see Christ as the defeater of darkness. Well, every major cult in today's world in some way removes one aspect of Christ so that their theology can be built. For example, in the Mormon world, it's the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints, they deny Christ as co-equal with God. They say that Christ and Satan were spirit brothers. Jehovah's Witnesses deny Christ's co-equality with God by translating verse 1 in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God, not God. They make Christ subservient to God. Both of these religions' bad theology is solved by the Nicene Creed, which was written in 325 AD. It completely agrees with John's testimony and completely destroys any theology that says Christ is lesser than God the Father. But do we create Christ as co-equal with God, or do we also live our lives in a way that tells everyone else that we believe he is lesser? Every time we make a false statement about Christ, for example, he never claimed to be deity, or he really didn't die on the cross, or the resurrection was a spiritual one and not a physical one. And finally, the disciples were so overtaken with grief that they all had visions until that grief changed into a new reality. And every time we bring shame to Christ through our actions, we deny his deity. Christmas time is the time that we see Christ as a little baby in the manger. Now, that picture is true and wonderful. However, it also gives us a false picture of Christ. We see him as helpless, and if we transfer that to an adult Christ, he cannot help us as adults. There's an ancient Christian hymn that states about Mary, "You are made more spacious in the heavens, most pure mother, for God cannot be contained by all the universe, and yet he chose to be contained in your womb for the sake of our salvation." It was by a miracle of God that Christ became man so that we might live.